Colorado rises like a kingdom of stone, its jagged peaks slicing into the atmosphere, its high-altitude plateaus stretching toward horizons untouched by time. At dusk, the last ember of sunlight fades behind granite ridges, and the night sky unfolds, vast, unpolluted, and brilliant. Here, far above the plains, the stars feel close enough to touch. And it is in these mountains, under these ancient skies, that one of North America's greatest mysteries hides. Scattered across Colorado's wilderness are ancient sites engineered with astonishing astronomical precision, observatories carved directly into cliff faces, stone alignments positioned on mountaintops, and petroglyph panels that synchronize with solstices, equinoxes, and even rare celestial events. To stand among them is to feel watched not by spirits or ancestors, but by civilizations obsessed with the heavens. Some of these structures illuminate only once a year, as if performing a ritual with the sun itself. Others cast shadows that track the lunar cycle with uncanny accuracy. A few align perfectly with constellations now shifted by precession, implying they were built at a time far older than the textbooks admit. Researchers call them ritual sites, solar markers, or cultural expressions, but these explanations feel too small. Too neat. Too unwilling to confront the truth in the stone. These are mountain temples aligned to the heavens, engineered with intentional precision. Some petroglyphs seem to predict eclipses. Others mark planetary cycles invisible to the naked eye unless recorded over generations. Scientific models offer partial explanations, but they stumble over the sophistication embedded in these carvings and alignments. How did early peoples track the sky with this level of accuracy? Where did this knowledge come from? And why does it appear concentrated in Colorado's highest, most inaccessible places? As the mountains settle into night and the stars burn brighter overhead, one question echoes across the silent peaks: how did ancient people track the heavens with this level of accuracy, and what were they watching for? According to mainstream archaeology, Colorado's human history follows a steady, predictable timeline. It begins with the Paleo-Indians, nomadic hunters who tracked mammoth and bison across the tundra at the end of the Ice Age. They left behind projectile points, animal bones, and temporary camps, not architecture, and certainly not astronomical monuments. After them came the archaic hunters and foragers, who roamed seasonally, crafting simple stone tools and rock shelters but leaving no evidence of complex engineering. Centuries later emerged the basketmaker cultures, early ancestors of the ancestral Puebloans. They wove baskets, shaped crude pottery, and began building small pit houses across the region. Only with the rise of the ancestral Puebloans, between 700 and 1300 CE, do we see advanced stonework, cliff dwellings, kivas, and ceremonial plazas. Their cultural achievements are undeniable, yet even at their height, their astronomical observations were believed to be symbolic rather than scientific, ritualistic rather than precise. Textbooks treat this progression as linear, logical, and complete. But Colorado's mountains disagree. Across high-altitude ridges and isolated plateaus, researchers have discovered astronomical architecture older than the tribal settlements supposedly capable of building it. Stone alignments dating back 1,000 to 3,000 years mark solstices and equinoxes with the accuracy of ancient observatories. Some alignments track the lunar standstill, a rare event requiring an 18-6-year observational cycle. Others synchronize with star positions from eras long before known cultures occupied these elevations. Then there are the petroglyphs, spirals that illuminate only during solstice sunrise, serpent figures casting shadows that move like time-keeping devices, circles marking eclipse cycles with near mathematical perfection. These recordings of sky events appear centuries older than any group officially credited with advanced astronomical knowledge in the region. Most puzzling of all are the structures found in remote mountain passes, walled enclosures, sighting stones, and carved alcoves that function as precise solar and lunar markers. Some date to periods when the region's inhabitants were supposedly nomadic, lacking both the stability and the specialized knowledge required to engineer celestial observatories. Mainstream archaeology calls these features culturally significant, ritual aids, or accidental alignments. But the patterns carved into stone argue otherwise. They show intention, repetition, knowledge preserved across generations, and a level of observational discipline far beyond what the official timeline allows. Something is missing, a chapter of sky watchers, architects, or priest astronomers whose presence left no written record, only stone pointing toward the heavens. Colorado's mountains have preserved the evidence. What the textbooks present as a complete story is, in truth, only the opening act. High in Colorado's mountains, far above the valleys where ancient peoples lived and farmed, stand structures that seem to exist for one purpose alone, to watch the heavens. These are the solstice sites, stone alignments, carved windows, and shadow markers that transform cliffs and ridgelines into living calendars. They do not record seasons loosely. They pinpoint astronomical events with a level of precision that rivals ancient observatories across the world. One of the most astonishing examples is Chimney Rock, where two towering sandstone spires frame the sky like a colossal cosmic gateway. Every 18.6 years, the moon rises between these twin pillars during a rare celestial event known as the major lunar standstill. This alignment is so precise, so dependent on decades of observation, that it suggests a culture deeply committed to long-term sky watching. No known group in the region is officially credited with such advanced astronomical knowledge, yet the stones say otherwise. Nearby lies the Archuleta Petro Observatory, a cliffside complex where carved notches and angled stones interact with sunlight on the solstices. At dawn on the summer solstice, a narrow beam of light pierces a carved aperture and illuminates a single spiral petroglyph, a phenomenon that lasts only minutes. On the winter solstice, the sunlight strikes a different part of the wall, marking the darkest day of the year with equal precision. These interactions feel engineered, as though ancient astronomers sculpted the rock to communicate with the sun itself. Even more mysterious are the sun dagger style sites hidden throughout the Rockies, places where shadows slide across spirals, zigzags, or circular carvings at exact astronomical moments. Some shadows split symbols cleanly in half, others bisect them at angles that mirror the sun's position on significant days. These mechanisms resemble the famous sun dagger at Chaco Canyon, yet their presence in Colorado suggests a widespread tradition of celestial engineering. These sites use the mountains as tools. Towering spires become sightlines. Natural windows become solar clocks. Rock ledges become precision gnomons marking the movement of the sun. It is one thing for ancient cultures to track seasons through observation. It is entirely another to carve architectural devices that record celestial events with mathematical accuracy. Mainstream archaeology frames these alignments as ritual features, symbolic gestures meant to connect communities with seasonal cycles. But this explanation falters when faced with engineering, the careful shaping of stone, the precise placement of sightlines, the consistency across multiple distant sites. Rituals may inspire architecture, but they do not require such technical perfection. This raises a deeper question: how did ancient peoples achieve this level of accuracy without modern instruments? To align structures with solstices and lunar standstills, a culture must track celestial motion over generations, record its progression, and construct monuments tailored to long-term astronomical cycles. Such dedication reflects a civilization that did not merely observe the sky, it studied, measured, and depended upon it. As the sun rises and shadows sweep across Colorado's mountain temples, one truth becomes increasingly clear: these sites were not built by accident. They were built with purpose, and with knowledge we have only begun to understand. Long before European maps carved lines across the southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, built some of the most astonishing star-aligned structures in North America. Their cities rose in tiers, their ceremonial chambers sank beneath the earth, and their great houses stretched across the desert like instruments tuned to the sky. Colorado's astronomical sites, scattered across high plateaus and remote mountain passes, echo these achievements with eerie familiarity. But the question remains: were the Puebloans simply skilled observers of nature, or inheritors of knowledge far older than their own civilization? Their architectural legacy begins with complexity that defies easy explanation. Multi-story complexes, some with hundreds of rooms, were constructed with mathematical precision. Kivas, circular ceremonial chambers, often contain light shafts and openings aligned to sunrise, moonrise, or the zenith of the sun. Certain great houses feature windows that illuminate interior symbols only during solstices or equinoxes, transforming stone into a living astronomical calendar. In Chaco Canyon, the epicenter of their cultural world, the engineering becomes even more striking. The massive structure known as Pueblo Bonito is oriented with near-perfect cardinal accuracy. Straight, wide roads connect distant outposts across miles of desert, forming alignments that mirror lunar and solar cycles. And on Fajada Butte, the legendary sun dagger marks the solstices and equinoxes with shadow patterns so precise they rival old-world observatories. These achievements form the foundation on which many of Colorado's sky-watching sites appear to stand. The light markers, aligned spirals, and carved apertures found in Colorado mirror Chicoan techniques, suggesting a shared knowledge system or a migrating priesthood that carried celestial expertise across the region. Yet several Colorado sites predate the height of Chaco Canyon, raising the provocative possibility that the Puebloans themselves inherited much of their astronomical understanding from an earlier, forgotten culture. Mainstream archaeology explains Puebloan astronomy as a complex agricultural calendar system. According to this model, tracking the sun, moon, and seasons ensured crop success, timing for ceremonies, and coordination across distant communities. While plausible, this theory fails to explain the sheer precision embedded in many sites. Tracking solstices for planting does not require spires aligned to lunar standstills occurring once every 18.6 years, or chambers engineered to interact with sunlight down to the minute. Another interpretation sees the ancestral Puebloans as practitioners of a ceremonial sky-watching religion. The stars were sacred, the cycles divine, and the architecture a way to materialize cosmology. But again, this does not fully account for the engineering. Spirituality may have provided motivation, but the execution required a level of astronomical knowledge typically associated with advanced civilizations. This leads to the most controversial possibility, the idea that the Puebloans inherited their sky knowledge from an older culture that once inhabited the region, a civilization whose monuments may lie buried beneath Colorado's forests or eroded into its cliff faces. The unusually early dates of some mountain observatories, the strange petroglyphs marking eclipse cycles, and the sophisticated alignments predating major Puebloan settlements all point toward a legacy older than the Puebloans themselves. Science insists these alignments are ritualistic, symbolic, or coincidental. But the stones suggest otherwise. They speak of precision engineering, long-term celestial tracking, and cultural continuity that should not exist in the official timeline. And as archaeologists continue to uncover astronomical sites in Colorado that appear older and more complex than known Puebloan structures, one haunting possibility emerges: some of these sky temples may exceed what the Puebloan culture, at that time, should have been capable of creating. Across Colorado's high plateaus and volcanic mesas, carved into basalt cliffs and sandstone walls, lie petroglyph panels that function like ancient star charts, maps of the sky rendered in spirals, serpents, animals, and celestial symbols. These carvings, scattered across the state's rugged wilderness, reveal a level of astronomical observation far beyond what conventional timelines allow. To stand before them is to feel as though you're reading the notes of a prehistoric astronomer. At the La Garita petroglyph fields, spirals dominate the rock. Some are simple circles, others are complex multi-ringed glyphs whose positions match solar events. During equinox dawn, sunlight cuts across the spirals at exact angles, splitting them with precision. In winter, a different set of spirals catch the sun's low arc, illuminating only their upper coils. These carvings behave like stone solar calendars, tracking light and shadow with engineered intention, not random placement. Farther south, on the volcanic slopes near Ute Mountain, entire panels appear to reflect constellations. Stylized animal shapes, long-bodied serpents, horned quadrupeds, bird figures with outstretched wings, correspond to star groups visible in Colorado's skies 1,000 years ago. Researchers argue these figures represent mythology, but the positioning of the carvings tells another story. They map almost perfectly onto Orion, Scorpius, and Cygnus, suggesting the creators charted the heavens with clear astronomical intention. In the Gunnison Basin, the famed sun serpent glyphs coil across cliff faces like celestial clocks. As sunlight moves across these carvings, the serpent's body seems to ripple, a shadow illusion timed to solstices and equinoxes. Some figures appear specifically designed to activate only during certain sky events. One serpent aligns with the June solstice sunrise, another tracks the winter solstice sunset, a third may mark the path of Venus. These are not crude drawings. They are interactive sky instruments. Mainstream archaeologists classify these symbols as spiritual storytelling, ritual imagery, or mythic expression. But these explanations fail to account for the carving's functional precision. Why carve a serpent that aligns with the solstice if the intent is purely symbolic? Why arrange animal figures to match star patterns if no practical use was intended? Why do the same astronomical symbols appear across multiple distant sites, as though part of a shared knowledge system? Adding to the intrigue are petroglyphs that seem to depict celestial catastrophes. At La Garita, one panel shows a spiked circle descending toward the horizon, interpreted by some as a comet. Near the San Juan River, another carving features a burst of radiating lines around a central dome, remarkably similar to Asian and European drawings of the 1054 supernova. At Ute Mountain, a jagged spiraling figure may represent a meteor storm, carved with a level of urgency unseen in other panels. Were these merely visions? Or did ancient skywatchers record events that shook their world? Patterns across these panels suggest the latter. These carvings are grouped in sequences, like chapters of a cosmic narrative: solstices, lunar phases, eclipses, planetary cycles, even rare stellar events recorded long before modern astronomy. Colorado's petroglyphs may not simply be art. They may be messages, encoded in stone by a prehistoric observatory culture, a people who watched the heavens with purpose, precision, and perhaps fear. High in the Rockies, where jagged peaks tear into the clouds and thunder echoes like ancient drums, indigenous traditions speak of beings who came from the sky, not as conquerors, but as teachers, watchers, and guardians. Across Ute, Apache, and Pueblo cultures, stories of these sky people intertwine with Colorado's most enigmatic astronomical sites, suggesting that the mountains may have been more than observatories, they may have been meeting places between worlds. The Ute people tell of star beings who descended along sky ladders made of light. These visitors arrived during sacred nights, teaching early people about the cycles of the sun, moon, and constellations. Some stories say these beings lived atop the highest peaks, where the air thins and stars feel close enough to reach. These mountaintops, long considered taboo for casual travel, often coincide with Colorado's best-preserved solar and lunar markers, hinting at a possible cultural memory preserved through myth. The Apache traditions speak of mountain spirits, powerful figures connected to lightning, stars, and celestial fire. They are described as descending from the heavens to guide ceremonies or warn of cosmic changes. Certain Apache stories mention watchers stationed on cliffs to observe the movement of the heavens, tales strikingly similar to the functions of Colorado's cliffside observatories and shadow-marking petroglyphs. Whether these beings were supernatural or symbolic, the alignment between mythology and astronomy is difficult to dismiss. Among the Pueblo peoples, oral histories describe sky ancestors who came down to teach, bringing knowledge of planting cycles, ceremonial timing, and the proper ways to honor the heavens. Some stories describe their descent onto sacred mesas, arriving at night and returning before dawn. The Puebloans believed the stars were living entities, relatives, guides, or ancient teachers. Many of their traditions center around the idea that knowledge came from above, not merely discovered by humans but gifted from cosmic sources. As with all ancient myths, interpretations vary. Were these beings literal? Were they metaphors for ancient astronomers? Or symbolic embodiments of celestial forces? Anthropologists lean toward symbolic cosmology, arguing that these legends reflect spiritual relationships with the sky. But the overlap between mythic locations and star-aligned sites raises a more intriguing possibility. These stories may encode ancient memories of sky-watching priesthoods, mountaintop astronomers, or of vanished people whose knowledge shaped the region before written history. What adds further tension is that many of the places associated with sky people, high peaks, solstice structures, shadow-marking petroglyphs, are still considered sacred or forbidden by tribal communities. Visitors are warned not to disturb them. Elders speak cautiously, often refusing to describe certain sites at all. Something happened on these mountains. Something tied to the stars. Something remembered in legend, carved into stone, and guarded through generations. And as Colorado's astronomical mysteries come into focus, one question lingers in the thin mountain air: were the sky people simply myth, or the last echoes of an ancient, star-watching culture now lost to time? Across Colorado's rugged mountains and high desert mesas, archaeologists and local explorers have uncovered artifacts that point unmistakably toward ancient sky-watching practices, tools and objects far more sophisticated than anything the official timeline assigns to early cultures in the region. These discoveries appear quietly in excavation notes, museum backrooms, and private collections, each hinting at a deeper astronomical knowledge once held by a people now lost to history. Some of the most compelling artifacts are stone slabs carved with precise sightlines. These flat, elongated stones contain grooves aligned to specific solar positions: summer solstice sunrise, winter solstice sunset, and even intermediate cross-quarter days. A few slabs feature twin notches that function like crosshairs, designed to frame distant mountain peaks or horizon markers. These are not decorative carvings. They are instruments, capable of aligning with celestial events with a level of accuracy requiring decades of observation. Even stranger are the polished stone mirrors discovered near several high-altitude sites. Smooth as obsidian but carved from local quartzite, these reflective surfaces may have served as heliographic tools for signaling across vast distances, or for calculating solar angles by observing reflected light. Their craftsmanship is far beyond what is typically attributed to early Colorado cultures. Several of these mirrors were quietly reclassified as ritual objects to avoid the thornier suggestion that they were scientific instruments. Another category of anomalous artifacts includes bone tools shaped for measurement. Some resemble gnomons or angle finders, others match the form of ancient Old World horizon measuring tools. A few bear meticulously carved notches spaced in repeating patterns, potentially marking days, lunar cycles, or eclipse intervals. These bones, often found near solstice-marking petroglyphs, were long dismissed as tally sticks or decorative items. But their mathematical spacing suggests a different purpose: tracking time. Ceramics add to the mystery. Across multiple sites in southwestern and central Colorado, archaeologists have found pottery patterns representing lunar cycles. These designs include 29 and 30 mark sequences, alternating spirals, and banded motifs that perfectly match synodic lunar months. Some vessels even depict paired spirals thought to symbolize lunar standstill cycles, an 18-6-year rhythm that only disciplined astronomers could identify. Official reports label the patterns as symbolic, but their numerical precision speaks otherwise. Yet the most unsettling discoveries are the ones that have disappeared. A carved sandstone disc rumored to show eclipse paths, now in a private collection. A set of mirror-like slabs removed from a museum exhibit due to interpretive controversy. Bone measurement tools found in the early 1900s, catalogued once, then never displayed again. Ceramic fragments with lunar cycle motifs reportedly transferred to university archives with restricted access. These vanished or sidelined artifacts form a pattern: the more astronomically advanced the object, the less likely it is to be publicly discussed. Scientific reluctance is understandable. Acknowledging such tools would force a major revision of North American prehistory. It would suggest that Colorado's ancient peoples were not merely observing the sky, but measuring it, calculating it, embedding its rhythms into tools, art, and architecture. It would imply mathematical knowledge preserved across generations, a prehistoric science hidden in plain sight. The artifacts remain. The alignments persist. The carvings still track the sun and moon. And together, they paint a picture of a culture far more sophisticated than the official story allows, a culture that understood the heavens with clarity we are only now beginning to rediscover. As Colorado's astronomical sites grow in number, solstice towers, shadow markers, cliff observatories, star mapping petroglyphs, and sky calibration artifacts, the evidence begins to feel too interconnected, too intentional, too advanced to belong to isolated tribal groups improvising ritual art. Instead, the mountains point toward a deeper, more haunting possibility. Colorado may have once been the heartland of a lost sky-watching civilization, a culture whose purpose and origins remain buried beneath centuries of silence. One theory suggests a pre-ancestral civilization with advanced celestial knowledge, predating the rise of Puebloan culture by centuries, perhaps millennia. This hypothetical society may have moved through the region long before archaeologists recognized permanent settlements in the area, leaving behind high-altitude observatories carved into stone. If true, Colorado's astronomical achievements weren't sudden innovations, they were inherited, echoes of a much older knowledge system passed down like sacred code. This would explain why some of the most sophisticated alignments appear at sites older than the communities attributed to them. Another possibility imagines contact or migration involving Mesoamerican astronomer priests. The parallels are undeniable: stepped architecture at Mesa Verde resembling early Maya designs, solstice marking windows like those at Teotihuacan, ceramic patterns encoding lunar cycles similar to Olmec and Zapotec motifs, road systems and sight lines reminiscent of Mesoamerican sacred geography. If traders, pilgrims, or priestly specialists moved northward through the Rio Grande corridor, they could have brought knowledge of eclipse prediction, planetary cycles, and ceremonial sky tracking. Some Colorado sites even mirror Mesoamerican techniques: carved sight lines, shadow interactions, and architectural alignments tied to Venus, a planet deeply revered in Mesoamerican cosmology. A third theory looks further back, to survivors of an older culture devastated by climate collapse at the end of the last ice age. As glaciers melted, river systems shifted, droughts scorched the southwest, and entire populations migrated or perished. Some researchers believe an advanced, prehistoric society, not technologically advanced, but scientifically disciplined, could have escaped destruction by retreating into high mountains where water and visibility were abundant. Their descendants may have preserved fragments of astronomical knowledge, building mountaintop observatories as memory anchors for a world that had changed beneath their feet. Most provocative of all is the theory that Colorado was part of a widespread North American astronomical network. When mapped, the continent's most sophisticated prehistoric observatories form a loose constellation of their own: Chaco Canyon's Sun Dagger, Mesa Verde's solstice-aligned windows, Cahokia's Woodhenge, Wyoming's Bighorn Medicine Wolf, Canada's Majorville Medicine Wolf, Colorado's Shadow Serpents, solstice towers, and lunar-aligned pits. The architectural parallels are staggering. Towers facing solar events. Circles marking celestial cycles. Long sightlines connecting distant peaks. Repeating symbols carved hundreds of miles apart. These similarities suggest communication, shared knowledge, or a spiritual scientific system bigger than any one culture. Such a network could have been maintained by itinerant astronomer priests, sky watchers traveling from site to site, recording and synchronizing celestial events across a vast region. Yet the question lingers beneath every theory: why were these people watching the sky so obsessively? Were they tracking seasons, as archaeology claims? Or were they looking for something else, something more dramatic, more dangerous? Some believe these observatories were built to record celestial cycles as part of a mythic worldview. Others suspect they were warning systems, a way to detect eclipses, comets, solar anomalies, or catastrophic sky events that shaped earlier civilizations. Petroglyphs depicting what appear to be comets, meteor storms, and supernova explosions add weight to this idea. Colorado's mountains may have served as a sanctuary for a culture that feared the heavens as much as it studied them. A people who understood that the sky was both a teacher and a threat. In the end, no single theory fully explains the scale, precision, and persistence of Colorado's sky-watching tradition. But together, they paint a cinematic and unsettling picture. A forgotten civilization, or a network of civilizations, once looked to these mountains as the perfect place to watch the heavens. Not merely for ritual, but possibly for warning. For all their beauty, sophistication, and undeniable astronomical precision, Colorado's skywatcher sites remain among the most understudied ancient structures in North America. They sit on mountaintops, hidden in forests, tucked into volcanic cliffs, places where the sky opens like a vast observatory dome, yet archaeology approaches them with caution, hesitation, and in some cases, outright avoidance. The reasons form a complicated web of science, politics, culture, and academic self-preservation. First, many of these sites lie on protected or sacred land. High peaks, volcanic mesas, and cliffside sanctuaries fall within national parks, tribal nations, wilderness preserves, or restricted ecological zones. Excavation is limited or forbidden. Even non-invasive testing requires permits that are rarely granted, especially when sites overlap with ceremonial areas still revered by Ute, Pueblo, or Apache communities. Elders frequently request that certain mountaintops remain untouched, a boundary archaeologists are ethically obligated to honor. Second, astronomy-based interpretations pose a serious challenge to mainstream archaeological timelines. If Colorado's ancient peoples tracked lunar standstills, predicted solstices with precision, or carved eclipse markers centuries before such knowledge appears in the historical record, then accepted cultural progressions must be rewritten. This is no small risk. Revising timelines disrupts decades of scholarship, textbooks, and theoretical models. And academia, like any institution, is slow to revise what it believes it has already settled. Compounding this is the academic pressure against alternative interpretations. Archaeoastronomy sits on a thin line, respected in New Mexico's Chaco Canyon or Britain's Stonehenge, but often dismissed elsewhere as fringe speculation. Scholars who push too far into astronomical explanations risk being labeled pseudo-archaeologists, a career-damaging stigma. As a result, many researchers choose safer interpretations: ritual site, symbolic art, cultural expression. Anything but observatory. Funding barriers deepen the silence. Archaeoastronomy receives little financial support, especially in the U.S., where research dollars prioritize settlement archaeology, environmental studies, or historical anthropology. Tracking solstice alignments across remote mountaintops requires equipment, travel, and time, all difficult to secure. Without large grants, long-term observation cycles, such as the 18-6-year lunar standstill, become nearly impossible to study systematically. Then come the federal restrictions, particularly when sites may contain burials, ceremonial materials, or objects claimed under NAGPRA. If even a hint of ancestral remains is suspected, research halts immediately. Many skywatcher sites remain closed because no one wants to risk disturbing sacred ground, violating law, or igniting cultural conflict. All these factors create a vacuum where anomalies slip through the cracks. And in that vacuum, something unsettling happens. Some discoveries are quietly dismissed. Sightline stones recategorized as natural. Carved eclipse markers labeled coincidental. Shadow-activated panels described as artistic randomness. Artifacts reclassified as ritual items rather than scientific tools. Reports rewritten to remove astronomical language. Not out of conspiracy, but out of fear of rewriting American prehistory, fear of academic backlash, fear of crossing cultural boundaries, fear of opening a door that can't be shut again. Meanwhile, the evidence grows. Year after year, more solstice markers are discovered. More shadow serpent glyphs activate at dawn. More high-altitude towers align with ancient celestial events. More artifacts suggest measurement, calculation, and scientific intent. Colorado's mountains are filled with sky temples, observatories, and encoded messages carved in stone. The silence surrounding them is not due to lack of evidence, but due to how overwhelming, and disruptive, that evidence truly is. Because if the truth were embraced, archaeology would be forced to ask the question it has avoided for decades: who were Colorado's ancient sky watchers, and what did they know that we have forgotten? Night falls differently in Colorado. The mountains rise like dark cathedrals, their jagged silhouettes etched against a sky overflowing with ancient light. The stars will overhead in slow, deliberate arcs, the same paths they have traced for thousands of years. And scattered across these peaks and mesas, the stone observatories built by unknown hands still track those movements flawlessly, as though time itself could never erode their purpose. The more we study these aligned towers, carved shadow markers, and petroglyph star maps, the clearer it becomes: the sky was once more than a silent backdrop. It was a cosmic message board, a calendar for survival, a clock for ceremony, a warning system for celestial events, and a divine script understood only by those who spent their lives watching. Every spiral, every notch, every engraved serpent carries meaning. Every mountaintop alignment tells a story in light. And the mountains remember. With each new wave of technology, LiDAR scanning that peels away forests, satellite imaging that reveals geometric patterns, AI that detects alignments hidden in rugged terrain, more skywatching sites emerge from obscurity. Places once thought to be random rock formations are revealed as precise instruments. Petroglyphs long dismissed as art activate with solstice light, their meanings suddenly clear. Observatories appear on ridges no one has surveyed in decades. The map of ancient astronomy expands a little more each year. It feels less like discovery and more like rediscovery, as though we are uncovering knowledge that was once common, once sacred, once essential. Perhaps these ancient builders weren't simply tracking the heavens out of curiosity. Perhaps they were watching for patterns, cycles, or signs we no longer understand. Perhaps they stood on these peaks not to worship the sky, but to listen to it. Because if the stones tell one story, and the stars tell another, the mountains whisper a third, the knowledge was never lost. Only forgotten. And the sky is still waiting for us to understand.